Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is looking at the transit of Neptune in Aquarius and the generation that corresponds with it. And it's really amazing because it goes along with Generation Z so well that it's truly remarkable. I feel this sense sometimes when I've done these types of generational planets videos that it kind of like overlaps. Some of the generations were not neatly assigned to one Neptune sign or Pluto sign, and in this case, it really does go along with that. And I think that the most important thing to take away from this is that we should, I feel like we should be quite loose about it and not get caught up in having to pin things down too much, because even within somebody's generation, they may not be influenced by something as much as somebody else. There might be other factors that a person kind of almost rejects their generation. I was a kid in the 70s, and I was a teenager in the first half of the 80s, and I loved the 70s. And when the 90s came around and I was in my 20s, I resonated more with the 70s and 90s than the 80s. And, if you examine that, I'm going to be doing videos with numerology in the decades. If you examine things like that, you can see, what they represented and why some people liked it and some people didn't. And for me, it just wasn't where I was at in terms of, my energy and what it represented. So you can even have those influences and it affects you in a different way. And, it's not going to always be one thing. So we have to look at what Neptune represents. It is a generational planet, which means that it stays in one sign for like about 15 years. So, usually I would say 20 as a generation, but you can you can look at it still as a very long stretch of time. And with Neptune, so the point being that it affects everyone who has that placement within a 15-year span, but it is an outer planet, so it doesn't necessarily affect them in a big way personally. It's really to describe the era that they are born into and the influences of the outer world more than anything else. But it does become more personal when you see what house it's in, for instance. Then it affects people a lot more personally, because everybody from your era that has the same Neptune isn't going to have it in the same house, and it's not going to affect them the same way in that sense. So, Neptune is the planet that rules Pisces and rules the 12th house, and it is otherworldly. And so I did a video on Neptune in Libra for the hippie generation, and how music, how the arts and love really cast a spell over that generation. And that was for better or worse, because, Neptune can also be about delusion. It can be about addiction. It has these deception. It has some elements to it that can be destructive. But on the positive side, it can be very idealistic. It can be very in tune with people at the spiritual level, in like a psychically. And so when we look at Aquarius, we're looking at the ruler of the 11th house, and this is the house of the collective. So Aquarius is associated with humanity and humanitarian concerns. Aquarius is about people from, I was going to use the word diversity, but I feel like that is a word that kind of has gotten distorted in a sense, and I don't really like to use that word. But it is about all of us. And so it doesn't have that exclusionary vibe. It's very democratic, not a political word, but meaning that everybody has a say. Um, and there is this, it's when we talk about the collective, we're contrasting it to the individual, where we have our individual souls and our individual purposes. Well, this is the purpose of groups and humanity as a whole. And it's also the house, or Aquarius associate with technology. And this is a big part of this generation, because even those born at the beginning of this transit, they were born in 1998. 1998 was a time when the internet had just started. I mean, it was, even in the early 90s, people were on the internet and stuff, but it was not massive at that time. And I think the first time I got on the internet was like in the mid 90s. And it sounds like I'm talking about the Victrola or the, getting in a Model T car or whatever is it Model A, Model T? I don't know. But it really was something that was not, I wasn't like on the internet in 1998 very much. I had gone back to college, and this is just a funny thing for those of you from this generation, because I don't know how many of you have ever seen a word processor before, but I had a friend who gave me his word processor, and this was kind of like a step up from typewriters, because it did have a storage device called a floppy disk. So if you think about SD cards and how small those are, think about something the size of like a coaster, a square coaster, and that's the size of an SD card. And I remember him telling me the storage capacity of this. I think it was like about 300 kilobytes. I can't remember, but it was the equivalent of 300 pages of text. So he and I were both into writing, and that's why he gave it to me, so that I could be able to use it. But I was going to college at the time, so he wanted to, give it to me, which was very nice of him. But it was just like a glorified typewriter. It was kind of in between a typewriter and a computer. And so I thought it was amazing that this disk could store 300 pages, because that's like the equivalent of a novel or something. And so you can see how things change. And like I just pulled up a site right now, and it's called advancedastrology.com. I don't know, is this the site? No, this isn't the one. It was a different site, and they were talking about, it's called the Astrology Place. And the funny thing is that this article about this generation, Neptune in Aquarius, I'll just read you something they said. So it shows you how quickly technology changes. They said, now remember, this is 2011. They said the MP3 player has now replaced most music players. People want music downloaded fast with thousands of songs loaded into one player. We have buried cassette tapes forever, and CD players have seen a steady decline. Well, you know what? They're still selling CDs, in the grocery lines at my Whole Foods. So it hasn't disappeared totally. And this is 11 years later. So that's kind of interesting too. But the important thing about this, when I talk about MP3 player, is that was before smartphones. And I don't know when smartphones came in, maybe about 2012 or so. But I mean, it's been only 10 years, So a lot of you have always, that's all you've known is computers. And some of us went many years without ever being on a computer. So there's like a difference when that happens. It's like the 100th monkey, which is just like you kind of just like are born knowing what to do. So I was I was trying to pull up a digital coupon at a museum last year, a couple of years ago, and this young woman who was probably a member of Generation Z, she goes, "Can I see your phone?" And she started doing stuff with my phone, real fast. And I was kind of offended because I was thinking, oh, well, she thinks that I don't know how to like look stuff up fast. And she was just like, her fingers were flying and everything like that. And I was just thinking about that, how it's like, and I'm not, I know how to use computers. I'm on my computer all the time, you know what I mean? But it's just like that generation, your generation, really are born, knowing what to do. Because you have this, and you know what it is too? If you have Neptune in Aquarius, you probably have like this, it's intuitive. It's like kind of baked into you to really know how to do that kind of stuff. So is that good or bad? Well, it's obviously going to be both because um, machines are not, machines and the internet are not real life. Even though I've kind of softened my stance on it, it still is like this barrier between you and life. So, but I've noticed that people who are younger, they don't seem to be on their phones like constantly compared to how it was when smartphones first came out. I was really a holdout on getting a smartphone because I couldn't stand seeing people just constantly glued to their phone, constantly texting. But now I notice people aren't texting, young people aren't texting as much because I think that lost its luster. They decided, I don't want to talk to anybody. I don't even want to text anybody. So that was like the novelty of it wore off, in other words. So one thing about, I was just looking online in general, and this one site said that Generation Z is the most diverse generation when you talk about race, when you talk about ethnicity, and certainly, even like I think part of that will be because there's so much more biracial, bi ethnic groups, mingling. There might have been a lot less of that or there was in prior generations. So the reason that this is important is because it allows people to transcend these things, because there's not this really strong definition or identity with one thing. And because Neptune is about dissolving barriers or boundaries, that helps the cause. And this, Aquarius is about the brotherhood of man. Now, because of our politically correct speech, I'm not even supposed to say brotherhood. I'm supposed to say mankind. Or no, I can't say mankind. Personkind, whatever, humankind, humanity. I'm not allowed to say certain things. And this is where we get into the hijacking and manipulation by, I'm not even going to call them the powers that be, because they're losing power every day, and they really are not. People gave them power. The people that are trying to manipulate, let's put it that way, is that they use, I think, and they say that they're very aware of occult practices and they know all about that. So they would know about astrology and numerology and all that stuff. So they hijack a whole generation by preying upon their, if you want to call it weaknesses or their sensitivities. And with the Generation Z, this is in the form of being very, very tolerant for all people of all types, and exaggerating it and making it like that everything has to be through that filter. And if somebody doesn't say the right buzzwords, then they should be canceled, they should be castigated, their lives should be ruined, and things like that. So you take something that has at its root a good purpose and you turn it into something ugly. And this is kind of what has been happening. And so, I mean, I already live in an area that's very diverse. So I don't even, it doesn't even like, I take it for granted, let's put it that way. And I've always lived in the same basic area. And when I was walking past the high school that I graduated from back in the 80s, and I was looking at the kids and how they were interacting, it was just amazing because there is no divide. When I was growing up, there was like, different groups were kind of hanging out with each other. Not to say that it was totally segregated at all. It wasn't. I mean, it was because it was, progressive area. It was always still, it wasn't like, that there was tension between different races or ethnicities or anything like that. But it was a lot more, kind of separated just because. And now it really is so integrated, but not like in a self-conscious way, in a very organic way. And that's the beauty of when something is natural, when it's not being forced from the outside. That's never good. It has to be authentic. And that's, I think, because these teenagers are part of Generation Z, because if it goes to 2012, it means that the youngest ones are 10 years old. And I think also another thing that I would say about this is the knowledge of astrology. Astrology is connected to Aquarius. And I briefly went on TikTok. I'm going to probably go again, but I just couldn't. It was too ADD. And I was just like, I can't stand how frenetic it is. But you can get followers fast on TikTok compared to these other sites that are, to me, very manipulated. I was getting so many like kids, and that's one of the reasons that I shut down my account, because I didn't want to really have, minors watching my videos. And they were like all these kids. And I was posting this question to a spiritual group that I belong to, and they were saying that young kids are into astrology. Because I just thought that was strange. I mean, cool, but strange. And I didn't even know if they were really kids. You never know, like, what's really going on. And they said, oh, no, I have a niece or whatever, who's into it, and she's only 10 or something. So that blew my mind. And that would be going along with this generation. So just people who are naturally intuitive, and they say that these recent generations are highly spiritual. But interestingly, Aquarius is associated with the galactics. So understanding even like beyond Earth, your identity. That's why we talk about star seeds and things like that, that these people from this generation are either interested in it or they have knowledge of it. And so I would say, like, on the plus side, that this can be people who use technology for spiritual purposes, and that could be like creating electronic music, to heal people, obviously, and things like that, and the ability to reach people. So networking, which I think is going to become very important in the next 10 years. Like right now, we're seeing the collapse of the old system. And so they say the golden age is starting in 2032, which is like 10 years from this recording. So, I mean, hopefully my videos will still be online and they won't just completely, just talk about them completely, just like wiping the internet, So, whatever. But in the next 10 years, as we see this shift, because Pluto is going into Aquarius, it's just a very interesting thing how the collective is coming together. So this generation can use their skills with technology, their ability to hook up with one another and help to usher in the golden age, because the older ones, let's say we're talking about 10 years from now, will be in their mid-30s by then. So anyway, the other thing I just wanted to mention, and the Astrology place membership.com, one of the things they mentioned was that the www, for World Wide Web, beginning of an internet address looks like the symbol of Aquarius, which I would never even have paid attention to. But astrology is such a kind of an all-pervasive influence that's not even, like I see sometimes like young people, their 20s or whatever, they put their astrological symbol and stuff like that. So I think it's pretty, big, all-pervasive, not like this kind of fringe belief anymore. And, speaking about Generation Z, I think that one of the things that we can talk about is this idea of freedom and taking it to a whole new level. So the ones who are older, who may have still gone to college, even though there's so many difficulties with college these days, they may be less inclined to really think, wow, I went to college, I graduated from college, because Aquarius is very much wanting to be unique, not wanting to be part of it. I mean, it's kind of like a paradox because it's part of a collective, but and this is true of people who are Aquarians. They love the idea of the collective, but they don't want to conform to groupthink. They want to have their own ideas, and they're like non-conformists. And this can run the gamut of how this manifests. It's not just somebody who drops out of society. It's like if everybody is, if somebody's raised in a commune with people who are weed smokers all around them, they might, end up in a conservative area with, and be completely sober or something like that. Not even do that. It's just different from what the norm is where they are being conditioned. And so I think that the pitfalls to avoid, which Neptune can really kind of like seduce people, is this idea of always being part of a collective instead of like being willing to branch out on your own and do something that may not, be what other people approve of. And to really think, and another thing about this is that to think that, hey, this culture, this nationality, or whatever the conditioning is that there's a good side to that. That creates true diversity, because if everybody is just kind of like in one, it's like that they used to talk about the melting pot, because they wanted people just to assimilate into one thing and just to be like everybody else, so of that country, like if they were immigrants or something like that. And now they use terms like toss salad or something, because that's more of a thing where you can maintain your distinctive qualities. You don't have to be totally in that, because, like I said, Neptune is really about merging. And yet, having boundaries is not a bad thing. And having distinctions is not a bad thing. Sometimes people are nervous about pointing out distinctions between different groups. And to me, that's intellectually disingenuous. That's not true. You should never like stereotype, because you can't do that, because it's not going to be true for all members of a particular group. But that doesn't mean that you should be acting like, oh yeah, everybody is the same, there's no differences, everything is just, exactly equal, when it's not equal on many different levels. So these are the kinds of things where the person can get deluded, and it can really, with this like kind of, I'm using the term wokeness because I think that it is highly problematic, and I think it's used as censorship, and also to create indoctrination, and to take things like labels and use them as weapons, like saying, birthing persons instead of mothers, and things like that. These terms, they can justify it, to a certain degree, but it just becomes really like absurd, bizarre, and a distraction. And maybe that's exactly what it's for. But getting caught up in those things, being able to use technology in a way that doesn't create losing oneself in a artificial intelligence simulated reality that's actually not true. And it's interesting because Neptune rules photography, and if we look with technology, we think about pornography, and the idea of getting lost in these kinds of manipulations that can have dark energy attached to them, can be used to kind of hijack people and get inside and control them to some level. So technology can have a dark side. And also, and a big one too that I think has to be said is even just, when you go online, you could be just looking under a YouTube video. You have to be careful of shills, people who are paid to post different things. Now, they may be saying casual statements, but they're really trying to, create mind control. And people, sometimes they don't understand this, because the person doesn't have like a profile. They might not even have a profile, but if they do, it doesn't necessarily, have some kind of business attached to it. But they may be, posting under alternative nutrition and trying to put it down, poke holes in it. I see this all the time, and I always call the people shills, whether they are or not, because I just feel very strongly that the only reason I feel we still have the internet is in order to brainwash people. Otherwise, it would have been gone long ago, because it has both sides. It can red pill people, can make people aware of what's really going on, because we're under massive assault of brainwashing. We have one-sided information provided. I was just looking up a particular subject. I'm not going to say what it is. And I don't even use Google anymore. I use DuckDuckGo. Scrolled for pages and pages. All it had were glowing reports about this particular thing in the health subject area, and nothing negative about it. So if you're going to tell me that that is fair and balanced, okay, right. So that's insane propaganda. And that wasn't always the case. that was not always the case. This has only been the last few years that it has gotten really, really, really bad. So I think that this generation has the ability to just use technology intuitively, just avoid the pitfalls, that the traps that are laid, that can deceive, that can put the person off on another path that they don't want to be on. But I think that this is definitely a very psychic generation for sure. So anyway, I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading and you're over 18, because some of you are, well, I don't think many people, I don't have like 10-year-olds watching me on YouTube, thank goodness. But anyway, if you're over the, if you're at least 18 and you'd like a personal reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.